Hi, I'm Clara.
And I'm Stephanie.
And this is the Practice with Clara podcast, where we go into philosophy and all things yoga related, which has been my passion for over 20 years.
This week our theme was Earth.
We went into the power of commitment,
healing through your history,
and how important exits and entrances are, not only in yoga poses, but in life itself. We hope you enjoy today's podcast, and if you haven't already, subscribe.
Welcome, everyone. You're sitting with Stephanie
and Clara
for the Practice with Clara podcast. And today we're really excited to talk about something we launched a week ago, the 30 Opportunities Yoga Challenge that came out on June 1st.
And so we created this, I think we created this just a couple of weeks ago and decided we really wanted to launch it, and off we did. Yeah. And we got over 300 people globally to join us in the challenge, and it's been an amazing week. Really, really excited. We're also doing it as a group, as a team.
Yeah, I think we started putting it together 3 days before, and it was just a full go through the weekend to pull everything together.
It was a week.
Get it out. Was it a week?
Yeah.
Because I feel like we were doing things leading up to, or maybe I was just excited. But what's really cool about this practice is it's really, the emphasis is on community in one hand, and then the other is more of the introspection of the practice. So really honoring your own experience and when you want to practice during the day, which I think is really important to acknowledge, what lights you up and when you want to step onto your mat and when you have time. So it's flexible in that all of these classes have been pre-recorded and come with a journaling prompt. So it's really about meeting yourself where you are that day. And then the second piece is feeding the community and coming to the Practice with Clara Facebook group and holding each other accountable.
And so we've had over 300 people join us, which has been amazing worldwide. And everybody is really sharing on the community board, which is one of the most amazing things. And when I put the playlist together, I really thought about different body parts and like how you're going to be feeling. Like in week 3, we don't have as much vinyasa yoga because I thought people would be more tired. Yeah. And it's been really, 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 it's been good for me.
Yeah, and seeing everybody shared, from all different parts of the world. Australia was one of them. Somebody had posted for us what was middle of the night about the class. I was like, great, you are done, and I haven't even gotten out of bed. Cool. And we asked people to share like what they're feeling that day. It's something simple like an emoji that describes their process in the class, and then the journaling prompt and what the practice felt like in their body, which is something that Clara, I think you really offer, is acknowledging your own process and how you feel day to day. And Clara, I wanted to ask you, so what is it that you want people to take away at the end of this process?
The biggest takeaway I wanted people to have coming out of the 30-day challenge is to reignite the power of dedication, the power of daily practice. And that doesn't necessarily need to, going forward, be showing up to the mat. It could be to the meditation cushion. It could be to, quite simply, your intention for the day. But the key behind it is having intention and doing something for the purpose of connecting to yourself or something greater than you, depending upon whether or not you believe in the divine or God. So that would be one of the biggest takeaways. And another takeaway is to remember that we're all in this together, and I feel like sometimes we forget that. And one of the ways that 30-day challenges usually do when we do it at studios is you see the same people over and over again. So you start to kind of build relationships, and I feel like we're really doing that on the Facebook page. There's been so many amazing comments, and I think people are it's really igniting this conversation about yoga and all things spiritually related. So it's been pretty cool.
And reminding that what it felt like to step into that communal space, because we haven't had that for a while now. So it's been really reassuring for me to come in and see people who are dedicated and holding us accountable. Because like Clara mentioned, we're doing it as well, and I haven't had a regular practice in weeks. So
and for me, like 3 months, I think, since like my last, like the tail end of my pregnancy, as well as the beginning of motherhood. So I've been really enjoying just showing up to my own mat every day when my little one's sleeping.
And it's grounding.
Yeah, so grounding.
And that kind of bleeds into our theme this week, which is Earth. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, Clara, is about the concept of sadhana. And this term is used in yoga So what it means and what it, the kind of space it provides.
Sadhana translates as practice, and people who do sadhanas are actually known as sadhnus. And so sadhnus are people who practice any kind of spiritual practice. Another word that people would use is sannyasin, which is like the renunciates, that they're the ones who only practice and they let go of the worldly, their worldly life. But sadhana, for those of us who are householders, is a daily practice that we incorporate into our regular life. And so, what was the second part of that question?
Well, what is the point of having this type of a practice, a day-to-day? What's the point of doing something like that?
The difference between sannyasins and householders, meaning renunciates and householders, is that renunciates, their whole entire life is dedicated to the practice, where householders, which is us, those of us who live in the regular life, who have families, who work jobs, the idea of the practice is different in the fact that by being grounded, by connecting to our own divinity or our own selves, then when we go through the rest of our day doing regular tasks, we do it hopefully with more intention and more presence.
And you're more connected to that space within.
Yes, and so we move from that space within, which is generally more grounded, more centered, less reactive, more responsive.
And talk a little bit about then the class this week, because we're still releasing the class of the week every Friday in tandem with the 30 Opportunities Challenge. So practitioners of the challenge can kind of choose if they want to do that class or the new class of the week, which is kind of cool. You get to choose. And the theme is grounded.
Yeah, so it was an earth themed class, so we stayed super low to the ground, not moving very quickly, and we chose to release this class at this time of year because we're moving in towards summer, and at least in the northern hemisphere we have a lot more heat, there's a lot more going on, people are outside more, so there's a lot more fire. So a great way to balance fires with earth or water, but we did earth this week. And so a practice that kind of just brings us back down to ourselves, move slowly, not too complicated, more introspective.
Maybe let's take this opportunity, speaking of poses and grounding, coming down to the ground. One of the questions from the community recently was coming in and out of difficult poses in a safe way. And I thought we'd talk about 3 in particular that deal with neck injuries if not performed safely and coming back down. So it would be wheel pose, shoulder stand, and tripod headstand, or any sort of headstand, Shirshasana A or B. So Clara, if you could elaborate on ways to prevent injury and coming out of each of those shapes.
As Steph mentioned, one of the biggest places for injury in all 3 of those is the neck, and the neck is already precarious because we live our lives kind of doing this and this and this and driving, right? So we're kind of already protruding our neck this way. It's not in a very stable place. So in Urdhva Dhanurasana and wheel pose, right, we're in that big bow shape that it's known as upside down bow, is that as we're kind of essentially looking towards or away from our hands, when coming down, we used to cue to put the top of your head down on the ground and then come down from there, but ideally we don't do that anymore, or hopefully you're not doing that anymore. So before you come down, you want to bring your chin in towards your chest and then gently press the back of the head where the occipital is, which is where your neck and your head meet behind you, or just above it, kind of going halfway towards the crown. Place that on your head down, or place that part of your head down on the ground first, and then slowly roll the rest of your spine down, taking your time, bending the elbows as you do that to come down. So that would be the quote-unquote safest way of coming out of that pose. And you always want to move slowly coming in and out of these kinds of poses, just because there's a lot of pressure on the neck, and the neck is not really meant to bear too much weight, specifically in the planes that we're moving in. Obviously it's holding our head up as I'm sitting here right now, but just in whenever you take your head back or forward, you're not on a super grounded place. So that would be wheel. In shoulder stand, the safest way of coming out of this is to bend your knees and put your knees on your forehead from shoulder stand. And we used to, again, cue a lot of straightening the legs and then rolling down from there, but that's actually involves a lot of core work, and depending upon where your core is, it's not so super great. So keeping the knees bent, right, gently pressing the back of the head into the ground and slowly rolling the spine, again, back down to the ground. So very similar kind of transitions. And then last but not least, any variation of headstand. So especially when coming up into headstand, you just want to make sure that the back of your neck is long. And so before you go upside down, I always recommend place the top of the head onto the ground, right? And I always tell people kind of start halfway between the crown of the head and the forehead, start in the middle. And then you want to put your hand on the back of your neck and then observe whether or not the neck is flat or whether or not the chin has come too far to the chest so that the bottom or the top, what was the top is now the base, meaning closest to the ground, right, is essentially one long line versus either rounded or in the opposite direction, right? So checking that is long before you go up is muy importante. And so you do that with your hands and then place your hands where they need to go. And then when you're coming down again, I would recommend, a lot of fancy people like to do straight legs coming down from pike, which is totally fine, again, if you're very strong in the core. But if you're not strong in the core and you start to come down, your neck is actually going to take the weight of your legs. So again, you want to bend your knees in towards your chest, right? And then slowly bring your feet down that way. So it's essentially, again, the same idea of this roll down, just in a different plane. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and like listening to you, I'm just thinking in my own experience, there's a lot of emphasis on the building up to the pose. There's a lot of cues going into poses, so that upward energy versus coming out of poses. I feel like there's less cues on the coming down and the grounding element, which is just as important as the building up to the pose, at least in vinyasa.
And why do you think that is?
Because the alignment coming in, alignment, I don't know. Alignment should be focused on coming in or out. Maybe because grounding, like you're talking about rolling out of things, is a little bit more intuitive. Making your way down to the ground is a more intuitive process. There's not as much fear as leading up to, say, like peacock pose or wheel pose. Mm-hmm. That's just my instinct. Feeling now. Yeah. What do you think?
I remember one of my teachers saying that coming out is as important as going in, and that people forget about that because they're already thinking about where they're going next.
Yeah.
So if you can stay present coming out versus thinking of where am I going next, it allows for more mindfulness. And as we know that, especially when moving through big poses, you want to move out in and out of them very slowly so that you stay integrated.
And just like reflecting on this whole piece from posture to real world, because that's what the yoga is. It's like that in everyday life, where all day you're thinking about the next thing you need to go do, and you're not necessarily thinking about taking a moment in between. At least I'm not. The whole day is kind of building, and then you get home and it's, I just want to sit down and, turn my brain off.
Yes.
So it's the awareness of coming back into what grounds me. In what ways am I going to do things that serve to keep myself in balance, my body in harmony, in alignment, whether it's in a pose or, after a long day of work.
And what do you do generally to ground? Like, what do you do? What is your transition from one to the other?
In yoga or in life?
In life. I'm kidding.
Well, that's what's so interesting about the challenge is I think I'm not speaking just for myself when I say my schedule is being completely inverted. So what I was doing before and things I were doing to ground, I'm not doing now because I'm not zipping around doing all the things. So I've had to do an investigation of, what does my day look like? What does grounding look like? What does it feel like? And that's what the 30 Opportunities is doing for me. In practicing yesterday, it felt so good. And I was stoned, and I let myself feel that for like 2 hours.
Nice.
It was great.
Because you didn't need to go anywhere.
I didn't need to go anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's different, and I don't know. That's kind of that's my question for the 30 days is what's going to emerge? What do I want afterwards? Because, grounding is differently for me right now. I used to read in between my schedule before COVID is I would read, and that would just connect me to my breath and my body, and my mind would focus on something, and then I'd move on. What about you?
I don't know if I really think about it until I get home. Like, I was just thinking right now, like after class, what do I do in terms of the grounding? But I feel like the Shavasana grounds. So then what happens from going to the yoga studio to the next thing? I think that the transition itself, like the moving through space to go to the next appointment or whatever it is, that moment of quiet is the way that I ground, actually.
But then what would you say in terms of entering events or situations where emotion or tension is high? And for me, I start getting outside of myself. I can get trapped in that cycle, and then all of a sudden my energy is way up here, and I'm feeling lots of things, and maybe you don't have time to go and meditate before you're meeting someone for dinner, or you have a work engagement, or you have to get on the bus and then you're surrounded by people you're not really right now. Like, that's not
In regular life, pre-COVID.
You know what I mean?
I do.
So then that's more of, what do you do in that circumstance?
One of my other teachers, Constantine Darling, used to talk a lot about feeling your feet on the ground. And so that's a great way to literally ground. So if you are transitioning from one thing to the other quite quickly, from one place to the other, or in a yoga class transitioning from one pose to the other, really feeling your feet on the ground and observing like which part of the foot is actually making contact with the earth is a great way to literally bring yourself to the ground. So that would be one way of doing it. The other way that I like doing it is exhaling out my mouth.
Like a purge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of letting it go if I'm feeling, especially if I moved really quickly and I'm like, so bring it back down. I literally, so feel the feet and exhale out the mouth.
This is reminding me of another question I wanted to talk to you about in terms of grounding, in a sense of, on the other hand, of persevering and enduring in moments where you can't escape. So it's similar to what I just asked you, but you can't escape what you're feeling. You need to move through. And, in a 60-minute vinyasa class, maybe you do walk out of the room, but you're there by choice. But so what I wanted to propose to you is speaking a little bit about when you gave birth to Carmen, because you're in it. That's right. Something's happening, whether you want it to or not. You made that choice a year ago, maybe.
I did.
Yeah. So in that moment, what are you doing to come back into that space where you're like, okay, I got this. Here we go, Clara.
One of the it was really cool being in labor because I've been in 3 birthing rooms as support, and so it was really cool. So I've seen women give birth, and that's an amazing thing to witness. And so I was really excited to kind of see what the other side looked like, what it was to give.
Being in the hot seat.
Yeah, to give birth, because what happens is you go into an altered state. Literally, like through the hormones and everything, and you are in an altered state. So you're not. So that in and of itself is grounding is not the right word, but it forces you to be very present. And the other thing that forces you to be very present is this very intense sensation known as contractions. And so, but one of the cool, what I worked with in terms of the contractions that was really, really interesting and also actually quite fun is to dive into them. So I envisioned that every time the contraction came, I would literally go, like I would dive into it like you dive into a pool of water, and kind of breathe. And it all, like there were times, I'm closing my eyes because I'm kind of remembering that. There were times when I felt like I was deep in the earth, and there were other times where I felt like I was in water. I really went on some really interesting trips, and then as the contraction comes out, or I would come out of the contraction, it felt like it resurfacing, and then looking around, and then feeling it come again, and dive back in. We go for this ride, and and then come back out, and so every time I came back out, I felt like it was literally like I imagined I was coming out of the water from holding my breath for an extended period of time. And so,
That's cool.
yeah, and the biggest thing to do, and I had learned this being a support for it, is to not to not actually not do anything, to allow it to happen to you. And so you're just on the ride without trying to change it or fix it or do anything about it. You're just like, cool. It's almost like someone's pulling you and taking you on this ride. I don't know if I answered that question.
You totally
okay,
did.
great.
You did. You go into it. So
Yeah.
you're receiving the experience.
Yeah.
You're not resisting.
No.
You're receiving
You
it. You're
you have to
it.
surrender. And like and I feel like my midwife actually even said it at a very intense point in the labor is like, this is preparing you for parenthood, because parenthood is a constant surrender, as I feel like all practices are.
Yeah.
Constant surrender. So surrendering to the sensation, surrendering to what's happening, trying not to fight it. Because when you fight it, then generally you contract. You literally, your body contracts. And so your vagina doesn't, your cervix doesn't open. It actually will close if you start to resist, right? So you need to relax into it, to soften into it.
So would you say then that grounding, a big part of grounding is surrender?
I think it depends on your relationship to earth.
Okay.
But my relationship to earth is somebody who has a lot of air and fire. So I have a lot of movement and I'm up here. A lot of the time I need to surrender in order to come down, to come back to earth. That is at least for me. But I don't think it's like that for others.
Like, give an example where element-wise it wouldn't work. Like, give me an example.
So if you are naturally inclined to earth, you don't have to surrender because you're already there.
Okay, I got that.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
So for somebody who is already earthbound, meaning they are very comfortable in the earth, it is their natural place. It's kind of how I feel about air, or like how I feel about movement. Movement is a very natural place for me to be. Being sedentary or being still is not. Like, it doesn't come to me naturally, so I have to surrender to it. I have to soften into it.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah. So then someone who's already in that space of groundedness, you don't have to do anything.
No, you're there.
You're good.
Boom.
Is everyone there, though? Are people there?
Yeah.
Are people there?
Not you and me, but other people, yes.
Like, all right. 30-day challenge. We'll see what happens at the end.
Yeah.
So another part of the earth element theme I wanted to bring forward is the idea of roots. And roots in the practice, the lineage of this practice being so old, dating back. I mean, I'll let you say the dates. You know much better than I do. And the unique element in the history through mantra, and knowing that so many more before us have said the same words and done this practice in creating this sacred effect in what we're doing together.
Kind of building on that and then riffing off of it in a different context is that I think, and we don't know definitely from our ancestors before writing, before the written word, is that there's always been seekers in all traditions all over the world, which I think is one of the coolest parts about all this, is that we've been asking the bigger question for centuries upon centuries upon centuries. So even outside of the lineage of yoga, just the lineage of seeking or mystics or looking and feeling for the divine, it's something that is innate in a lot of us, not in all of us, but it's innate in, I think, the human race is questioning and asking. And trying to seek something that is larger outside of ourselves, which to me is the coolest thing ever. And then the other part, kind of going back to what you were saying, Steph, is like Gayatri mantra is the one that I'll think of, which is from, it's one of the oldest mantras of India. It's from the Rig Vedas, which is the first of the 4 of the sacred texts of India. And that dates back about 2500 BC, which is crazy. And so to think of how many people chanted Gayatri before 2020 is so cool. So that when you chant the mantra, you're connecting to the vibration that has been occurring for centuries.
And what is the Gayatri mantra? What is the essence of that mantra?
The Gayatri mantra is an asking of our guides, both seen and unseen, to illuminate our path as we walk forward.
Is that with the cucumber severed from the vine?
No, that's the Mahatma Jaya mantra.
Okay, that's my favorite mantra.
Yeah.
Sorry, total deviation, but...
That's a great one. Om Bhur Bhurva Swaha Tat Saviturvarenyam.
There we go. That's one I'm thinking.
That's Gayatri mantra.
That's Gayatri mantra.
Yeah.
What's the other one?
Om Triambakam Yajamahe.
Right, got you.
Really fun mantra to chant.
They're both so fun. Yeah. And what So what's the relevance there in grounding, in knowing, understanding your roots? And even so, taking it, like you're saying, in philosophy and seekers and the mystic practice of yoga, but even understanding our own roots through our family tree. Like what is that? How is it relevant?
One of my favorite quotes is, in order to move forward, you need to know what came before.
That's great.
And so I'll say that again. In order to move forward, you need to know what came before. And so to understand not only your blood lineage, but also the lineage of whatever practices you're doing, knowing where it came from and how it came to be really allows you to move forward with a stronger, with more honor. I was going to say something else, but I think I'm going to say honor. You're honoring what came before, and then you're building and riffing on it. And in that way, you're respecting what essentially the path that you are walking was one that was paved by the people before you.
And would you also say that in understanding our history, we create more space to heal?
Tell me more.
I just think with more understanding of the past and what's happened throughout history, some of the greatest innovations, but also some of the tragedy that's occurred, we have more of an awareness to reconcile and move forward with more compassion, kindness, and not necessarily heal what's happened in the past, but heal ourselves so we can move forward to make better decisions, like you just said.
Yeah, and can you give me an example? Because I feel like you're thinking of something specific.
I just think given a lot of things that have happened in the past and decisions we make moving forward, reflecting on the past. Being very vague.
Very super vague. Can you give a concrete example? Or no?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd rather leave it open-ended so then anyone can think of their own.
Okay.
Reflect on their own.
What that makes me think of specifically is my professors at university, and the ones that were so stoked about what they were teaching and had done so much research, like it was their life passion, whatever it was that they were teaching, and how engaged you were with them, or how engaged I was, and I was like at the edge of my seat, listening to whatever it was that they were talking about, versus the people who are teaching the course because they need to, or they're trying to keep their tenure or whatever, and they're not interested in what's happening, and you can tell that they haven't put very much energy into whatever it is that they're teaching. They're just trying to get the hours in.
Yep.
And I feel like that makes such a difference as the student.
And there's a big piece, and this is something I was chewing on a couple of days ago that I think is fascinating. We every day get to choose the language we use and the history we want to preserve. And it's something as small as a conversation you're having with someone, or on a bigger scale, like the teachers, politicians. We're literally shaping the future for the next generations in the language that we choose.
What a beautiful thought, and intense all at once.
Very intense. But if you think about it, if we quit bringing up the same history, it dies where we leave it. I think that's so cool. And also kind of scary.
Yeah, a little morbid, but cool.
Yeah, because think anything that we don't want to keep dragging around. It's like what you said, let it go. If you want to move through something, put it down. Don't pick it up again. Mm-hmm. And that's going to bring me into a question I had for you. In some of the things you want to bring to Carmen, have you thought about any of the things that your parents or people who influenced you, your teachers, from past cultures, traditions, that you want to give to your family?
I think the biggest thing I want to give Carmen is freedom. And one of the greatest... I'm smiling because I remember meeting a friend, who now a dear friend of mine, for the first time, and she was like, wow, you were really loved when you were young for who you are.
Bless.
Yeah.
That's so great.
And I was, in the fact that I was really encouraged to be the person that I was, and without any apologies around it.
Why did she say that to you? What was happening that she said that?
Just the confidence that I have.
Okay.
For whatever it is that I was, literally she was, because I have like a reassuredness, or like a confidence. She was like, I can tell you were really supported when you were young. And so that is the biggest thing that I want. I was given that from my parents. And one of the things that my dad told me recently is that before the age of 5, he actually didn't teach me manners because he didn't feel like... He felt like you're going to spend your whole life having to do things like say thank you and please and all that, and there's only a very short window to be a child and to be free. So he wanted me to just quite be without putting as little constriction as he needed to. That being said, my grandparents thought I was a barbaric child because I didn't say please and thank you, but he allowed me to roam free. And I think that was one of the greatest gifts I was given as a child.
And it's interesting because if you think about what we term as manners, that's just something our civilization has created as a social decorum for us to get along together in large groups. But previous societies, we don't know some of the things they did.
Well, yeah, they had their own traditions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what were manners to the Egyptians?
Yeah.
Like,
but the big, and also building on that though is that essentially children are free and what we do as parents and as a society is we make them conform.
Yep.
Which is necessary in order for all of us to get along, because I can't come and steal your toy and then run off.
Yep.
But yeah, I'd love, the biggest thing I want to offer is an acceptance for who she is in her totality to the best of my ability. And also to be free, to allow her to be and explore as she wants to. What do you think yours, I'm going to ask you, what do you think was your greatest gift in your childhood from your parents?
Oh, my parents inspired the imagination. Like my mom, we spent a lot of time outside, and my mom ran a daycare, so we were around a lot of different kids. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And she kind of let us play whatever. We had a big dress-up box of different outfits she got from Value Village, and I'd write stories, and then we'd act them out outside. And we were just kind of given free reign outside with this big dress-up box, or inside if it was cold. It was the prairies, so it snowed. So yeah, I think that probably. And I just always think with kids, what I would want to do if I had my own is, because kids are all love, but you want to teach them discernment, how to be that love, but also discern, not judge. That's a harsh word, and I think that's a little bit more instructed, is, use your best judgment. Use your discernment.
What does discernment mean, or how would you define it?
Discernment seems more curious than judgment to me. Judgment has a really heavy hand where it's like, you are not like me, so you're othering. Whereas discerning, to me, seems like it's a little bit more inquisitive.
But how would you define it?
Discernment, to discern something, you're looking into something.
Okay, so it's an inquiry?
Yes. Versus a judgment to me is like, okay, you're doing this thing, I don't approve. Judgment is almost like an approval. Maybe I have the terms of these words wrong.
No, judgment has a negative connotation. I don't think it's negative. I feel like judgment is just, what is this?
Okay.
Whatever it is that I'm looking at. Attaching an opinion to it, if it's negative. I feel like generally people attach a negative opinion and then they call it a judgment.
Okay. So then how would you differentiate discernment versus judgment?
Yeah, negative and positive.
Okay. So that's what I mean.
Yeah.
To be more discerning in how they're interacting with the world, but not cutting things off as other.
Yes. And that would be a positive way of inquiry.
Yeah. And it's in coming back to the practice, we're all a part of the same divine, if you want to call it that, right? No one is other. Okay, I'm going to ask you one of my last questions. So what I read of the element earth, and you said this also of ether, that ether contains all of the elements within it. I also read that earth was the container for all of the elements, that no other element could exist outside of earth.
Because it's the first element.
Yes. And then everything else comes from within it. So
Except ether is actually separate.
From everything.
Yeah. It's in everything, but everything is not in it. Earth is the first element of the tangible elements.
So that's the differentiation.
Yeah.
That sounds a lot like what you said about ether. But in terms of, so everything coming out of Earth, it's that seed. It's that grounded space. It starts from there.
And it's darkness, right? It's generally also described as dark, heavy. And so from darkness came light.
Okay, so let's take this in another direction. Tell me more about honoring the darkness in the practice.
What do you mean by that?
So usually, not necessarily always with you, because you do invite us to explore darkness. Usually the practice is more of an inspiration to uplift, to get things moving, to shake things up. Maybe talk a little bit of some of the offerings that you've had in exploring the darkness and why one would do that, why you just don't want to hang out in the light space.
And why do you think that is?
Oh, the shadow, exploring the shadow side.
And why is it important?
To understand dualism.
Okay, keep going.
To understand all of the elements of what it means to be human.
Great.
And welcome them all.
Mm-hmm.
As children do.
Mm-hmm.
They don't hide, they don't suppress, they're just, I'm here, this is how I'm interacting with you.
Yes.
Take it or leave it, love it, or don't.
Or don't.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's yoking all of it, and that's yoga.
Yeah, and accepting. I think the biggest thing about, the biggest part of the shadow is that we push away from it because we're uncomfortable with it, or we're ashamed of it, or we have guilt around it, or we want to hide from it or hide it from other people, when it is us, right? We are both. There cannot be, the yin and the yang. There cannot be darkness without light or lightness without dark. They both live inside of each other, and there's so much to learn. Right. This makes me think of one of my favorite authors, Rob Bresney, who is an astrologist, but uses astrology really as a medium for his writing. He wrote a great book called Pronoia, and in it he has something called the Shadow School. And the Shadow School is all about this opportunity that when intense or negative emotions arise, that it is an opportunity to learn more about ourselves, to kind of dig into the fertile ground, the dark earth that is the parts of ourselves that we're not necessarily proud of.
And that's something that will come up, perhaps, in the 30-day challenge. Coming right back to that where we began, in when you stay with something for a prolonged period and keep meeting yourself, maybe you get into the shadow element that you mentioned.
Yeah, especially when your body gets tired, or you are doing something that you have dedicated yourself to, like a 30-day challenge, but you're tired that day, you're not feeling good. Yeah. And so when there's resistance, there's always an interesting opportunity to grow.
And introspection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
So I think that's a perfect time to wrap it up. And what we wanted to do is just a sweet reminder that we're offering all essential workers and frontline workers a free membership to our site for 3 months. And so you can drop us an email at info@ClaraRobertSauce.com. If you are one of those two things, or if you know anybody who is, we'd love to gift it to the people who are supporting us and allowing us to quarantine or to be self-isolated, but still be able to live and enjoy the good things in life like food, and also doctors who are supporting us. So you can email us there, and I think that wraps it up.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steph, for all your amazing questions. And we'll see you next week. Peace. Thank you for joining us today on the podcast. Today's podcast was brought to you by the Practice with Clara app. That's mine. I've created almost 100 yoga classes for you to do at home or on the go. And they're available to you on your favorite device, including mobile, desktop, and TV. These classes include vinyasa, slow flow, hatha, restorative, yin, mantra, meditation. I also just had a baby, so I created prenatal yoga for all 4 trimesters. So head over to ClaraRobertSauce.com/join to learn more. Or search for the Practice with Clara app at your favorite app store. There's a 7-day free trial, so no commitment. And make sure to subscribe to the podcast. We've got lots of good stuff in store for you. Until next time, namaste.